They thought they could just bulldoze my family's century-old farmhouse and get away with it. They were wrong. Dead wrong. When that yellow excavator rolled onto my property that morning, I wasn't home. By the time I got the frantic call from my neighbor, half of the hand-carved oak porch my grandfather had built was already in splinters. The farmhouse that had stood proudly for 5 generations. The one where my children took their first steps, where my father had taught me to whittle wood on summer evenings, was being demolished because of a clerical error. Or at least, that's what they called it. The Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association had somehow acquired demolition rights to a property they didn't even own, my property. They claimed there was confusion about property lines now that they were developing the adjacent land. A simple mistake, they said. An unfortunate accident, they insisted. Just business, nothing personal. But when I saw Patricia Wellington, the HOA president, standing there in her tailored suit, not even bothering to hide her smirk as she watched my family history crumble to dust, I knew this was no accident. This was calculated. This was war. What they didn't know, what Patricia and her board of vultures couldn't possibly have realized, was that they had just declared war on the wrong person. I'm not just some simple farmer with a pretty house. I'm a real estate attorney who specializes in property rights and eminent domain. And I had already been watching their development with suspicious eyes for months. That day, standing in the rubble of my grandmother's kitchen, I made them a promise they didn't hear. I would own everything they were building. Every brick, every nail, every blade of grass in their precious development would be mine. And they handed me all the ammunition I needed with one catastrophic clerical error. They destroyed my home to build their kingdom. They never imagined I would end up owning it all. If you love stories of justice, standing up for what's right and exposing HOA corruption, subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. We're building a space where homeowners can share their experiences, learn their rights, and support one another against unfair HOA practices. I'd love to know where you're watching from, so leave a comment down below. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the story. My name is Michael Harrington. 3 years ago, I was living the dream that had been passed down through generations of my family. Our 15-acre farmhouse property sat on the outskirts of what used to be a small town in North Carolina, with rolling hills and a stream cutting through the back acres where my kids would catch frogs in the summer. The house itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, a Victorian farmhouse with modern amenities that I'd carefully added over the years without disturbing its historical integrity. The property had been in my family since 1897. My great-great-grandfather had built it with his own hands after emigrating from Ireland. Each generation had added something to it. My grandfather built the wraparound porch and gazebo. My father modernized the kitchen while keeping the original hearth. I had added solar panels hidden on the back roof slope and geothermal heating that cut our energy bills while preserving the home's character. We were happy there. My wife Ellie taught at the local high school, and I ran my law practice from a converted carriage house on the property. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, were 12 and thriving. We grew our own vegetables, kept chickens, and even had a small apple orchard that produced enough fruit to make cider every fall. Then Meadowbrook Development Corporation came to town. It started innocuously enough. A few for sale signs appeared on the 200-acre dairy farm that bordered our property to the east. Old man Jenkins had passed away, and his children, who had long since moved to the city, were eager to cash in. I couldn't blame them, but I did worry about what might replace the peaceful farmland. My worries were confirmed when the town council announced that Meadowbrook had purchased the land and planned to build a luxury housing community of 50 homes. The glossy brochures showed McMansions packed together on half-acre lots with names like the Belmont and the Wellington Estate. Each home starts at just $750,000. The first time I met Patricia Wellington was at the town hall meeting where Meadowbrook was presenting their development plan. She stood at the podium in her crisp navy suit, pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, her blonde bob not moving an inch as she enthusiastically described the exclusive community that would elevate the entire region. Meadowbrook Estates will bring jobs, tax revenue, and prestige to this area, she announced, clicking through slides of architectural renderings. Our homes will feature only the finest materials, and our community will maintain the highest standards through our comprehensive Homeowners Association guidelines. I raised my hand during the Q&A. Ms. Wellington, I own the farmhouse property adjacent to this development. What assurances do we have about drainage issues? The Jenkins farm has always absorbed significant runoff from the hills, and if you're paving over large portions of it, that water has to go somewhere. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened just slightly. Mr. Harrington. Michael Harrington. Mr. Harrington, our engineers have developed a state-of-the-art drainage system that will actually improve water management in the area. You have nothing to worry about. She moved on to the next question before I could follow up, but after the meeting, she approached me in the parking lot. Mr. Harrington, I understand you're an attorney, she said, extending a business card. I nodded, surprised she'd researched me. Meadowbrook always likes to maintain good relationships with our neighbors. Perhaps your firm might be interested in handling some of our closing work once we begin selling homes? We anticipate quite a volume of business. The offer was clear. Keep quiet. Get paid. I took her card but made no commitments. Construction began 3 months later. The peaceful sounds of birds and wind in the trees were replaced by the constant beep-beep-beep of backing equipment and the roar of excavators. Dust coated everything. Our white farmhouse turned a permanent shade of tan. When the first heavy rain came, I was awakened at 2 a.m. by Ellie shaking my shoulder. Michael, there's water in the basement. Sure enough, 3 inches of muddy water covered our basement floor, ruining boxes of family photos and the kids' old schoolwork I'd stored there. The state-of-the-art drainage system had channeled water directly toward our property. I documented everything, took photos, and called the town engineer the next morning. He arrived, looking uncomfortable as he surveyed the damage. This shouldn't have happened, he admitted. Their retention ponds aren't complete yet, but they should have temporary measures in place. I called Meadowbrook and left 3 messages for Patricia. On the 4th day, her assistant called back. Ms. Wellington asked me to inform you that Meadowbrook is not responsible for seasonal flooding in older homes. Perhaps you should consider updating your foundation. My name is Michael Harrington. 3 years ago, I was living the dream that had been passed down through generations of my family. Our 15-acre farmhouse property sat on the outskirts of what used to be a small town in North Carolina, with rolling hills and a stream cutting through the back acres where my kids would catch frogs in the summer. The house itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, a Victorian farmhouse with modern amenities that I'd carefully added over the years without disturbing its historical integrity. The property had been in my family since 1897. My great-great-grandfather had built it with his own hands after emigrating from Ireland. Each generation had added something to it. My grandfather built the wraparound porch and gazebo. My father modernized the kitchen while keeping the original hearth. I had added solar panels hidden on the back roof slope and geothermal heating that cut our energy bills while preserving the home's character. We were happy there. My wife Ellie taught at the local high school, and I ran my law practice from a converted carriage house on the property. Our twins, Emma and Ethan, were 12 and thriving. We grew our own vegetables, kept chickens, and even had a small apple orchard that produced enough fruit to make cider every fall. Then Meadowbrook Development Corporation came to town. It started innocuously enough. A few for sale signs appeared on the 200-acre dairy farm that bordered our property to the east. Old man Jenkins had passed away, and his children, who had long since moved to the city, were eager to cash in. I couldn't blame them, but I did worry about what might replace the peaceful farmland. My worries were confirmed when the town council announced that Meadowbrook had purchased the land and planned to build a luxury housing community of 50 homes. The glossy brochures showed McMansions packed together on half-acre lots with names like the Belmont and the Wellington Estate. Each home starts at just $750,000. The first time I met Patricia Wellington was at the town hall meeting where Meadowbrook was presenting their development plan. She stood at the podium in her crisp navy suit, pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights, her blonde bob not moving an inch as she enthusiastically described the exclusive community that would elevate the entire region. Meadowbrook Estates will bring jobs, tax revenue, and prestige to this area, she announced, clicking through slides of architectural renderings. Our homes will feature only the finest materials, and our community will maintain the highest standards through our comprehensive Homeowners Association guidelines. I raised my hand during the Q&A. Ms. Wellington, I own the farmhouse property adjacent to this development. What assurances do we have about drainage issues? The Jenkins farm has always absorbed significant runoff from the hills, and if you're paving over large portions of it, that water has to go somewhere. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened just slightly. Mr. Harrington. Michael Harrington. Mr. Harrington, our engineers have developed a state-of-the-art drainage system that will actually improve water management in the area. You have nothing to worry about. She moved on to the next question before I could follow up, but after the meeting, she approached me in the parking lot. Mr. Harrington, I understand you're an attorney, she said, extending a business card. I nodded, surprised she'd researched me. Meadowbrook always likes to maintain good relationships with our neighbors. Perhaps your firm might be interested in handling some of our closing work once we begin selling homes? We anticipate quite a volume of business. The offer was clear. Keep quiet. Get paid. I took her card but made no commitments. Construction began 3 months later. The peaceful sounds of birds and wind in the trees were replaced by the constant beep-beep-beep of backing equipment and the roar of excavators. Dust coated everything. Our white farmhouse turned a permanent shade of tan. When the first heavy rain came, I was awakened at 2 a.m. by Ellie shaking my shoulder. Michael, there's water in the basement. Sure enough, 3 inches of muddy water covered our basement floor, ruining boxes of family photos and the kids' old schoolwork I'd stored there. The state-of-the-art drainage system had channeled water directly toward our property. I documented everything, took photos, and called the town engineer the next morning. He arrived, looking uncomfortable as he surveyed the damage. This shouldn't have happened, he admitted. Their retention ponds aren't complete yet, but they should have temporary measures in place. I called Meadowbrook and left 3 messages for Patricia. On the 4th day, her assistant called back. Ms. Wellington asked me to inform you that Meadowbrook is not responsible for seasonal flooding in older homes. Perhaps you should consider updating your foundation. And threats tied to real estate transactions? Those were actionable. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. I needed more. The next week, the town's building inspector showed up unannounced. Got a complaint about unsafe structures, he said uncomfortably, not meeting my eyes. Need to inspect the whole property. He found nothing, of course, but 2 days later, I received a notice of code violations that would cost thousands to address outdated wiring claims, foundation concerns, improper ventilation allegations, none of which the inspector had actually found. Then came the noise. Construction had moved to the section of Meadowbrook directly bordering my property, despite town ordinances restricting construction hours. The work began at 5:30 a.m. and often continued until after 10 p.m. Every complaint I filed mysteriously disappeared from the town's system. My family was being worn down. Ellie was exhausted from the constant noise. The kids couldn't sleep. Even our dog was anxious and on edge. Maybe we should consider selling, Ellie suggested one night after a particularly bad day of dust and jackhammering. Not to them, but maybe find somewhere else. This is affecting everyone. I understood her feelings, but something in me couldn't accept defeat. This was my family's legacy. 5 generations had protected this land. I wasn't going to be the one who gave it up because some developer decided they wanted it. Just give me a little more time, I promised. I think they're going to make a mistake. I didn't know then how catastrophic that mistake would be. October 15th. The date is burned into my memory. I was in court that morning, representing a client in a property dispute ironically similar to my own situation. Ellie had taken the kids to school and then gone to work. The house was empty except for our old retriever, Max, who was too deaf to be bothered by the construction noise anymore. At 9:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mrs. Abernathy, our neighbor from half a mile down the road. "Michael!" Her voice was shaking. "There are bulldozers at your house. They're tearing it down." I thought she must be mistaken. "They're probably just working on the Meadowbrook section behind our property," I said, trying to calm her. "No, Michael. They're on your property. They've knocked down part of your house already. I tried to stop them, but they showed me some papers and said it was all legal. I called the sheriff. I dropped everything, told the judge it was an emergency, ran to my car. The 20-minute drive home was the longest of my life. When I finally turned onto our long driveway, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Half of our historic farmhouse, the east wing with the sunroom and the twins' bedrooms, was a pile of splintered wood and broken glass. Dust filled the air. An excavator was poised to continue the destruction. I slammed on my brakes, jumping out of the car before it had fully stopped. "Stop!" I screamed, running toward the construction crew. "What the hell are you doing? This is private property." The foreman approached, hard hat in hand, looking genuinely distressed. "Sir, we have demolition permits and authorization from Meadowbrook Development. Are you the owner?" "Yes. This is my house. What authorization? Show me." He handed me a folder containing permits from the town and a document that made my blood run cold, a quitclaim deed with my forged signature, transferring a property easement to Meadowbrook Development. The easement supposedly included the right to remove structures in conflict with development plans. It was all forged. Crudely, obviously forged. My signature didn't even look close to authentic, but it had somehow been notarized and filed with the county. As I was trying to comprehend this, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "What seems to be the problem here?" Patricia Wellington was walking toward us, flanked by 2 men in suits. One I recognized as Meadowbrook's attorney. I thrust the papers at her. "This is fraud. You forged my signature. You have no right to be on my property, let alone demolishing my house." She barely glanced at the documents. "The paperwork is in order, Mr. Harrington. Perhaps you've forgotten to sign it during one of our many negotiations." "Negotiations? You offered an insultingly low price, which I rejected." "I never signed anything." Her smile didn't waver. "Well, that's not what the county records indicate. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a schedule to maintain." She turned to walk away, signaling to the excavator operator to continue. That's when I snapped. I ran in front of the excavator, pulled out my phone, and called the sheriff directly. I knew the sheriff had played poker with him monthly for years. "Jim, it's Michael Harrington. I need you at my property now. Meadowbrook is demolishing my house with fraudulent paperwork." Within minutes, 2 sheriff's vehicles arrived, lights flashing. By that time, Mrs. Abernathy had also brought over her adult sons, who were physically standing in the way of the machinery. Sheriff Jim Wilson took one look at the situation and ordered all construction to stop immediately. "Ma'am," he said to Patricia, "I'm going to need to see the authorization for this demolition." She produced the same documents I had seen. Jim examined them, then looked at me. "This doesn't look like your signature, Michael, because it's not. It's a forgery." Jim turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, we have a problem here. Until this is sorted out, no further demolition can take place. My deputies will remain on site to ensure that." Patricia's composure finally cracked. This is outrageous. We have permits. We have deadlines. Do you know how much money every day of delay costs us? Not as much as a criminal fraud charge will cost you, I said quietly. The color drained from her face. The rest of that day was a blur of police reports, emergency calls to my insurance company, and the devastating task of telling Ellie and the kids that part of our home was gone. The twins' rooms were destroyed, along with all their belongings. Family heirlooms, photos, treasures that couldn't be replaced are all gone. That night, as we stayed in a hotel, I held Ellie as she cried herself to sleep. The twins were unnaturally quiet, in shock from losing their rooms and possessions. I lay awake until dawn, my mind racing. The forged deed. The demolition without proper verification. The obvious targeting of my property specifically. Meadowbrook had made a catastrophic mistake, one that no amount of legal maneuvering could erase. They had physically destroyed my property based on fraudulent documents. No jury in the world would side with them. But simple damages weren't enough. Not anymore. They hadn't just attacked my property. They'd attacked my family, our history, our sense of safety and belonging. As the first light of dawn broke through the hotel curtains, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to sue Meadowbrook. I was going to own them. And I knew exactly how to do it. The first person I called that morning wasn't a contractor to secure what remained of my home. It wasn't my insurance agent to start the claim process. It was Sarah Chen, the best forensic accountant I knew. Sarah, I need you to dig into Meadowbrook Development Corporation. Everything. Financial statements, corporate structure, ownership, loans, investments. I want to know if they're leveraged, who their investors are, and if there's any hint of financial impropriety. That sounds extensive, Michael. What happened? They destroyed half my house yesterday based on forged documents. This isn't just about damages anymore. There was a pause. I'll clear my schedule. Next, I called my former law school roommate, Ben Martinez, who now specialized in corporate law. I need to form an LLC immediately. Today. And I need it to be untraceable to me. Ben didn't ask questions. That's why I called him. Third, I reached out to Janet Wong, an investigative reporter who had covered development controversies for the state newspaper. I'd helped her with legal background for articles in the past. Janet, remember when you were looking into predatory development practices last year? I've got a story for you that makes those look minor. She was at our hotel within the hour, recorder in hand. While Ellie took the kids to buy essential replacements for what they'd lost, I began implementing my plan. First, the legal front. I filed for an emergency injunction against Meadowbrook, preventing any further work not just on my property, but on the entire development pending investigation of the fraudulent documents. Judge Reynolds, who had seen me rush out of his courtroom the day before, granted it immediately. Second, the public relations front. Janet's initial article ran the next day, featuring photos of our partially demolished historic home and quotes from neighbors who had witnessed the destruction. The headline was perfect. Century-old farmhouse demolished. Homeowner claims corporate fraud. By noon, local TV stations were covering the story. By evening, it had been picked up by regional news. Third, the reconnaissance. I hired a private investigator to look into Patricia Wellington personally and to interview residents from the other Meadowbrook communities she'd developed. Within days, my suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't the first time Meadowbrook had used aggressive tactics to acquire property they wanted. The PI found 3 other homeowners in different counties who described similar experiences: harassment, fraudulent claims, mysterious code violations, though none had escalated to actual demolition. A week after the demolition, Sarah called with her preliminary findings. Meadowbrook is overextended, Michael. They've got loans on all their properties, and this current development is highly leveraged. If construction stops for more than 30 days, they'll start defaulting on their construction loans. That explained the desperation to continue despite the injunction. They weren't just being stubborn, they were fighting for survival. Ben called next. Your LLC is set up. Cornerstone Holdings. Everything's in order. What's next? I need to know who holds Meadowbrook's loans, I told him. Already looked into that, he replied. Their primary construction financing is through First Capital Bank. They've got about $22 million in loans outstanding for the Meadowbrook Estates project. I smiled for the first time in days. Thank you, Ben. That's exactly what I needed to know. That afternoon, I visited First Capital Bank and asked to meet with Morton Fields, the VP of Commercial Lending, whom I knew from previous real estate transactions. Michael, terrible business about your house, Morton said, ushering me into his office. I saw it on the news. That's actually what I'm here about, Mort. I understand your bank holds Meadowbrook's construction loans? He shifted uncomfortably. I can't really discuss client relationships. I'm not asking you to. I'm here to make you aware that Meadowbrook is currently enjoined from continuing construction due to serious legal issues, including documented fraud. As their lender, you should know that this isn't going to resolve quickly. Morton's face fell. This was exactly the kind of risk banks hated. Furthermore, I'll be filing a substantial civil suit against them this week. Given the nature of their actions and the evidence we have, we'll be seeking damages in the 8-figure range. I thought you should know, as it may affect their ability to meet their obligations to your institution. Morton was now visibly concerned. I appreciate it. Courtesy of this visit, Michael. One more thing, I said, standing to leave. If Meadowbrook's loans were to become available on the secondary market due to these concerns, my investment group would be very interested in acquiring them. At an appropriate discount, of course. I left Morton sweating behind his desk. 2 days later, I filed the lawsuit, a comprehensive case detailing not just the destruction of my property, but the months of harassment, the fraudulent documents, and the pattern of similar behavior in other communities. I requested $15 million in damages, plus punitive damages to be determined by the court. The media coverage exploded. Meadowbrook's stock price dropped 18% in a single day. Patricia requested a meeting through her attorneys. I declined. This wasn't time for negotiation yet. Instead, I focused on building community support. I invited residents from Meadowbrook Estates to an informational meeting at the town library, expecting perhaps a dozen people. Over 50 showed up. I know many of you recently purchased homes in Meadowbrook Estates, I began. I want to assure you that my issue is not with you, but with the development company, and specifically their business practices. A man in the back raised his hand. We've been getting letters saying that your lawsuit could bankrupt the development and leave our community unfinished. Is that true? I nodded. It's possible. Meadowbrook appears to be in a precarious financial position. But that's not due to my lawsuit. It's due to their own overextension and, frankly, their criminal behavior. Murmurs spread through the room. What happens to our homes if they go under? A woman asked anxiously. Your homes are yours, I assured her. But the common areas, unfinished infrastructure, and planned amenities would be at risk. The HOA would likely face significant special assessments to complete anything Meadowbrook promised but hasn't delivered. That sent a wave of concerned conversation through the room. However, I continued once they quieted. If the development assets were acquired by a more responsible entity, one committed to fulfilling the promises made to homeowners, the transition could be relatively smooth. Like who? Someone called out. I smiled. I'm working on that. In the meantime, I'd suggest you attend your HOA meetings and start asking Patricia Wellington some hard questions about Meadowbrook's finances and their ability to complete the project as promised. The meeting ended with many residents exchanging contact information and forming an ad hoc committee to investigate their situation. Seeds of discord were planted in Patricia's previously united community. 2 weeks later, Sarah called with crucial information. Meadowbrook missed a loan payment to First Capital. The bank is getting nervous. The next day, I had Ben contact First Capital Bank through Cornerstone Holdings, expressing interest in acquiring Meadowbrook's debt. Morton Fields called me directly. Michael, I presume Cornerstone Holdings is your entity? I can neither confirm nor deny that, Mort, but their offer is legitimate. He sighed. The bank's credit committee is meeting tomorrow to discuss the Meadowbrook situation. I'll keep you informed. 3 days later, Cornerstone Holdings acquired Meadowbrook's loans at 60 cents on the dollar, a $8.8 million investment to control $22 million in debt. The bank was happy to offload the increasingly risky loans, and I now held the financial future of Meadowbrook Development in my hands. Patricia finally realized what was happening when Cornerstone Holdings issued a formal notice of default on the construction loans. Meadowbrook had 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure on all assets associated with the Meadowbrook Estates development. Her call came that evening. "This is your doing, isn't it, Michael?" Her voice was tight with fury. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Patricia." "Don't play games. Cornerstone Holdings, the loan acquisition. You're trying to destroy us." "No, Patricia. I'm not trying to destroy you. You did that yourself when you forged documents and demolished my home. I'm simply protecting my interests." "What do you want? To stop the foreclosure? Name your price." I laughed softly. "It's not about money, Patricia. It never was. It's about justice and legacy. See you at the foreclosure proceedings." I hung up, letting her stew in the uncertainty. The next day, I received an unexpected visit from James Wellington, Patricia's husband, and the silent financial partner behind Meadowbrook Development. "Michael," he said, looking considerably less polished than his wife, "we need to talk sensibly about this situation." I invited him into what remained of my home, now secured with tarps and temporary supports. We sat in the kitchen, the only room on the ground floor that was still fully intact. "This vendetta against Meadowbrook has gone far enough," he began. "Yes, mistakes were made. Serious ones. We acknowledge that. But foreclosing on the development doesn't help anyone. Not you, not the homeowners, not us." "It helps justice," I replied calmly. He leaned forward. "Patricia doesn't know I'm here. And she doesn't know everything about Meadowbrook's finances. There are irregularities that would not withstand close scrutiny. Irregularities that could result in criminal charges if exposed during bankruptcy proceedings." Now we were getting somewhere. "What kind of irregularities, James?" "Let's just say that investor funds may have been allocated to projects and accounts they weren't intended for. Patricia has expensive tastes." I simply nodded, waiting. What if Meadowbrook were to reorganize? New management, new practices, full restitution for your property, of course. And Patricia? He hesitated. She would step down. Permanently. I considered his offer. It wasn't enough. "Here's my counteroffer, James. Meadowbrook transfers all ownership of the development and HOA control to Cornerstone Holdings. You and Patricia sign non-compete agreements preventing you from developing in this state again. You provide full documentation of these irregularities you mentioned. In exchange, Cornerstone doesn't pursue criminal charges and allows you to quietly exit the business." His face paled. "You want everything? You destroyed my home, James. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" After a long silence, he nodded. "I'll talk to Patricia." As he left, I knew I had them cornered. The only question was whether Patricia's pride would allow her to accept defeat. The final HOA meeting of Meadowbrook Estates was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in the clubhouse they'd built as the crown jewel of the community. I arrived early and took a seat in the back, watching as nervous homeowners filed in, whispering among themselves about rumors of bankruptcy and unfinished construction. Patricia entered exactly at 7, looking remarkably composed given the circumstances. Her makeup was flawless, her suit impeccable. Only the tightness around her eyes revealed the strain she was under. "Good evening, everyone," she began with practicing cheerfulness. "Thank you for coming tonight. We have several important items on our agenda." She was interrupted by a homeowner in the front row. "Is it true Meadowbrook is going bankrupt? What happens to our community?" Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "I assure you, despite some financial restructuring, Meadowbrook Development remains committed to completing this community as promised." Another resident stood up. "Then why has construction been stopped for 3 weeks? And why did my contractor tell me that Meadowbrook hasn't paid its suppliers in over a month?" Murmurs spread through the room. Patricia raised her hands, trying to regain control. "Please, everyone. These are complex business matters that don't need to concern homeowners. The HOA is separate from the development company and will continue to function regardless." That's when I stood up. "That's not entirely accurate, Ms. Wellington." All heads turned toward me. Patricia's face hardened when she saw me. "Mr. Harrington, this is a private HOA meeting. You're not a resident." I smiled and walked to the front of the room. "Actually, as of this morning, I am. Cornerstone Holdings is now the owner of all common areas, unfinished lots, and development rights formerly held by Meadowbrook Development." Gasps and confused questions erupted from the residents. "Furthermore," I continued, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the commotion, "under the HOA bylaws that Ms. Wellington herself created, the developer maintains majority control of the HOA board until the development is completed. Since Cornerstone Holdings now legally stands in the position of the developer, we now control the HOA board." Patricia stepped toward me, her composure finally cracking. "This is outrageous. You can't just... It's all perfectly legal, Patricia. The paperwork was filed this morning. Your husband signed everything." The color drained from her face. "James wouldn't. He did. To avoid criminal prosecution for financial fraud. Speaking of which..." I turned to address the homeowners directly. "As the new controlling entity of your HOA, my first act will be to commission a full forensic audit of the HOA finances under Ms. Wellington's management. Preliminary evidence suggests that significant amounts of HOA fees may have been improperly allocated." The room erupted in angry questions directed at Patricia. She looked around wildly like a cornered animal. "This is slander!" she shouted over the noise. "He's manipulating you. This man has a vendetta against Meadowbrook because of a simple construction accident." "A construction accident?" I repeated incredulously. "You deliberately demolished my historic family home based on forged documents. That's not an accident. That's criminal destruction of property." One of the homeowners, a retired judge I'd spoken with previously, stood up. "Ms. Wellington, is this true? Did Meadowbrook forge documents?" Patricia's eyes darted around the room, finding no allies. There was confusion about property lines. Mistakes in paperwork happen." "Forgery isn't a mistake," I said quietly. "It's a crime. One that Meadowbrook won't be prosecuted for, thanks to our settlement agreement. But make no mistake, Patricia Wellington is no longer in charge here, not of the development and not of your HOA." I turned to the residents. As the new controlling entity, Cornerstone Holdings makes the following commitments to all Meadowbrook Estates homeowners. First, all promised amenities will be completed according to the original timeline. Second, HOA fees will be reduced by 25% effective immediately. Third, all residents will receive voting rights on the HOA board, eliminating the developer-controlled structure that Ms. Wellington implemented it. The mood in the room shifted palpably. Confusion and anger gave way to cautious optimism. "Furthermore," I continued, "the restrictive and punitive HOA regulations will be revised with homeowner input. No more fines for garbage cans being visible for a few hours. No more requirements to plant specific species of flowers. Your homes are yours, and this community belongs to the people who live in it, not to a corporation. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then building. Patricia grabbed her purse and started for the door, her face a mask of hatred. I caught up to her in the foyer. One last thing, Patricia. The settlement agreement requires you to vacate the model home you've been living in. It now belongs to Cornerstone Holdings along with everything else. She whirled around, her composure completely shattered. You can't do this. That's our home. It's a model home owned by the development company, which I now control. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings. Where are we supposed to go? For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. That's not my concern. Perhaps you should have thought about the consequences before destroying someone else's home. She stormed out into the night, leaving behind the empire she'd built. The next morning, I had breakfast with Ellie and the twins at our hotel. What happens now? Ellie asked quietly while the kids were distracted by their pancakes. Now we rebuild, I said, showing her the architectural plans I'd been working on. A new farmhouse, on the same foundation but with modern amenities. We'll incorporate what's left of the original structure and restore what we can. And Meadowbrook? Cornerstone Holdings will complete the development as promised, properly this time with appropriate drainage and infrastructure. The homeowners are innocent in all this. They just wanted nice houses and a good community. Ellie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. And what about us? Can we ever feel the same about our home after all this? It was a question I'd been wrestling with myself. I think we can make it better than before. Not the same, but something new that still honors our family's legacy.